Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Every time we get together with her, there's some kind of aha moment, like things we realize about our lives and our bodies and our health that I never recognized, never realized. And I try to keep my finger on the pulse of these things, and she brings it to light. And I'm sure everybody else is thinking the same thing. Well, I didn't know that. Today, we're going to talk about things that you wouldn't realize impact your health. It's all kind of centered around something called Shao Yang. I'm not
Shao
really sure.
Yang. Shao Yang.
She's going to explain more. She is an acupuncturist, herbalist. She's also a massage therapist, and she's back with us. Rebecca Wendler-Burke, our professional of the year, is here. How's it going?
Good. Thank you. Nice to be here again.
So say it again.
Shao Yang.
Shao Yang.
Yang. Yeah.
Yang.
Yeah.
Yang.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the extraordinary meridian, or the area in the body that is considered neither internal nor external. And it's where a lot of latent pathogens will reside. And as I mentioned in our second interview, there can be a sort of long-term lingering effect to some of these latencies, and they will smolder, and they will create an issue that is, quite frankly, nonlinear. There are certain heralding signs that you can use as an acupuncturist to understand that an individual may be in a Shao Yang crisis. There are a number of pathogens actually that kind of go this route. And there are some things that are not pathogenic that can cause a Shao Yang disorder, like I mentioned in that second interview, of taking astragalus for too long and closing the pores and making it so that the muscle layer couldn't vent, the pores wouldn't open. But then there's another prevalence in our modern day where we are in like a very hot environment. Like I remember being in Reno and it was like 105 degrees, and then you walk into like a Safeway or something and they have the air conditioning on, and all of a sudden your pores are like, whoo, it's chilly. And then you go back outside and your pores are dysregulated and you can't sweat. And so that is a summer heat condition that affects, an area like the Shao Yang, where you'll see like an individual will maybe have some nausea, and like in some ways the body is trying to open up the pores, get rid of whatever toxin it is perceiving. And in this case, it's not a toxin, it's just a dysregulation of pores.
Wow, I didn't even realize that. It's especially when you now reverse it, you're leaving a grocery store, it's cold out, and then you get to the foyer as you're exiting, and then it's warm. You're like, this feels great. And then you go outside. Like it's Jedi mind trick.
Yeah. Yeah. The pores are an interesting one for mitigating the sort of internal breath-like function for expression of some pathogenic things.
So when we talk about Shao Yang and what could be affecting us, parasites, does that come under that category?
It can. So historically, the heralding illness for a Shao Yang has been malaria.
Okay.
And so that's a bloodborne vector via mosquitoes. And the pathogen sort of gets into the lymph in the fascia and the interstitial areas of our body. And it's my understanding that if you are in a warm environment, then you can have this sort of malarial alternating chills and fever, nausea kind of thing. And when you're not in a hot environment, it seems to go dormant. And that's because, we have a number of reasons to sort of look at the Shao Yang right now with a few of these malarial or like mosquito-like vectors creating like encephalitis and things like that. And so that is sort of an understanding of how these pathogens remain latent in certain lymphatic spinal areas and stuff like that. Now, parasites have long been sort of one of those like, oh, I had no idea. Everybody kind of maybe has one. They're nasty, right? And they can really kind of like screw up your digestive system and stuff like that. That's not necessarily a Shao Yang. That is more of sort of like a digestive Yang Ming situation that affects the large intestine and the stomach. So
It was it was the crispy noodles I ate with the Shao Yang. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Um, I'm always transparent. I took a test, and somebody told me recently I may have parasites,
Mhm.
Clostridia.
Okay.
That's what it's looking at with this wellness test. Looking, deeper into it, it's my understanding that we all got stuff going on like that. Not really impacting me at all. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I remember eating an oyster at a farmer's market, and the next day I was like, "Ooh, something's just not right." And I felt like I was going to throw up, and anyway, and I took something called diatomaceous earth. It's DE for short. It is
Isn't that the stuff that they use in pools?
yeah, but yeah, so that's a good point because you need food grade. Some of the stuff that you use in pools is not for consumption.
Right.
Farmers will use it in their animals' feed in order to reduce parasites and things like that. But what we're talking about are like tapeworms and flukes, and the possibly the one that you've got. So diatomaceous earth is a very interesting substance because it's coral. It's a microscopic coral, and what you consume, the parasite will consume. But in addition, the parasite is surrounded by all of the food that you have consumed. So if you eat something like diatomaceous earth, it will lacerate the parasite and it will also desiccate it. So as you know, I think that it's a really interesting thing to take when you're traveling. It kind of looks like a white weird powder that maybe you'd have a problem with TSA. But it's, for if you're going to like, Mexico or places where they don't necessarily have good, good water and things like that.
Wow.
Giardia would be one that you could resolve with diatomaceous earth.
How much, how long, and
Yeah,
what can you
yep.
tell us?
Yeah, so you would probably do a teaspoon, diluted in water like a solvent, or suspension, excuse me, and you would drink it, and you would probably do that for 3 to 4 times a day for approximately a week. And the symptoms will subside, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you've gotten rid of the parasite. You've just kind of like reduced its activity in your body. Other things that are important for resolving a parasite would be something like oregano oil. There are several supplements out there. One of them is called Paragard, Paragard. And that is a really good one for kind of like killing all of the weird stuff that might be in your digestive system. And it's an important, yeah, maybe you should give me a call after this, Steve.
I think so because you've been down this road,
Yeah.
and you hear all these different things like, and we just we're giving an example here, but like with the parasites, I was told you need to do uh, a detox, a cleaning, then do this and do that and do this, and it's very tough to get rid of, and on and on and on and on, and I'm like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep. Yeah. Diatomaceous earth is a good one just to kind of do as a preventative. And even if you see those symptoms, Paragard is a good one if you have a very strong suspicion that you have something like that. And it's not a bad idea to just do it, kind of on a 3 times a year basis, just to kind of clear out. If you picked up something like that's one of the complications with eating organic is sometimes you can pick up a parasite.
Wow.
So yeah, there's another one through doTERRA that's I cannot remember the name of it, but that's a good one. And I remember taking it because it was like, oh, I'm just going to kind of clear out my microbiome. And there was a moment in the kitchen where I was like doubled over in pain and on the floor. And then the next morning there was like a triangular long object in my bowel. It was kind of shocking, and we just don't know that we have these things. They are so prevalent, and it is a very good thing to think about on a regular basis, just to kind of prepare and be preventative for the off chance that you might have something like that in your gut.
I'll be calling you.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you see those shows on reality TV or Tales from the ER and all those and tapeworm, doctors pulling it out and I guess I'm confirmed because I took a test. But again, you had it. Many of us have it, don't even know that we do. I don't really have any symptoms. I've had, in the last 6 to 8 months, off and on little digestion things here and there, mainly related to stress, mitigated that and all of it. Um, so I wasn't dealing with an obvious like you were with
Mhm.
this. Um,
Yeah, well, so that is an interesting point because the parasite needs to maintain its host. Like it doesn't want to kill you because it wants to thrive and survive in your body. And, so there's like there are not a lot of signs unless you have something like giardia that can be really, really problematic for digestive and stuff like that. So some of these, latent parasites, like their objective is not to kill their host. They want to trick your microbiome into eating the substance that will maintain their vitality. We'll say that, which is really like, zombie.
when I woke up today, I did not know this is what my first conversation would be. Never even thought. And then now I have this visual of the parasites in our stomachs, like that. Hey, Jimmy, look what he just ate. Oh, stay
Yeah.
away from that. No, no, no. Like they're down there, they're they're commiserating, and they've got a plan to keep the host alive, but also thrive on their side. All right,
Yeah.
we will be talking about that. Let's change gears.
Yeah.
I don't even know how.
Let's talk about
Mold.
mold. Hmm.
Yeah, it's a big thing. Many of us aren't aware that we're affected. Um, can I share a story of
Yeah.
somebody? So I recently met somebody, young mom. Her kids are, like 2, 5 in that territory between, and they were all getting sick. They were
Mhm.
losing their hair. Had no idea what it was. Go to doctors. They don't have any. Finally, it got traced back to mold at her place. And the way I met her was at a networking event, and she was promoting the place she works at, a mold remediation company, because she started working with them after realizing all of this. And we actually did a podcast. I'm like, you know what? Let's talk about this because it's such a big deal. And
Mhm.
it's still, she had a full blown issue getting rid of this mold. I don't know if it was black mold or whatever it was, but it was making she and her family sick. I mean, very, very ill.
Yeah.
Uh, that could be happening. We might think, oh, I have allergies. Oh, I'm sneezing. No, it's mold. What can you tell us?
Yeah. So if you Google mold symptoms, the CDC will tell you that you can have like rhinitis, like some sinus irritation, some sneezing, some things that look like allergies. But mold is very pervasive. And it will eventually, after prolonged experience, affect your microbiome in that way of sort of changing what you would eat on a regular basis. It it kind of hijacks your body. And in Chinese medicine, we have an understanding of the Shao Yang where you have that sort of neither internal nor external pathogenic component, but we also have like the Du meridian or the spine, and so mold will reside in the Shao Yang level, and it will also infect the spinal fluid, which is why you kind of see some people that kind of go bonkers. Like there's like not just a physicality where
Oh,
their digestive system has changed. They are maybe more susceptible to allergens and things like that, but they kind of get a little bit crazy. Like, and I mean this with all empathy because um,
wow.
it's yeah. So I may get some flack for this, but are you aware of Brittany Murphy? She played in the 8 Mile alongside
Yes.
Eminem. So
Now come back. Yeah.
yeah, so she bought Britney Spears's house in LA, and there was a
Brittany bought Brittany.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
I
know
didn't
it's
know that.
crazy. Yeah, so I'm not gonna like postulate that Britney Spears, whatever, sort of
Uh,
like anyway, the mold that was in that house eventually killed Brittany Murphy. And her mom was up in arms, like they didn't know what was going on. And I believe a few months later, her boyfriend died because of this exposure. And it can be deadly. It is one of these sort of things that I think poses so many threats to human health. And it can have just sort of this like moving target kind of thing to try and figure out what is this? What's going on? Why am I lethargic? Why can't I think? Why do I have brain
Wow.
fog? Why? Yeah, and so I think that mold is a really challenging thing in our environment, and especially given the weather that we've had. Like my son goes to a five elements martial arts thing, and it's an old building, and there's a basement, and I like walked in and was like, "Ooh, I smell mold. I can't be here." I just get very triggered by mold, having had almost a near death experience myself with it in Santa Cruz. And so damp environments pose the biggest health risk for this. Like Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina and stuff, like there was a ton of black mold, and being able to remediate or fix the problem is very challenging. It is a very pervasive
And
pathogen.
as I learned from this woman whose family was affected by mold, she started working with a mold remediation company just because she wanted to be proactive in all of this. Many times, insurance doesn't cover it.
Mhm.
Many
Mhm.
times it doesn't cover it. And
Yeah,
now you have
yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars you're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah. So, landlords are also supposed to be held accountable for black mold and the like in their rental properties. And that is a very challenging litigation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
First, you got to find it. So you're renting a property. Are you going to pay, as a renter to find out if you have mold? That's not easy to do. You have to come in, mold test, and there's different types of tests. They can do a quickie, but you need it. It's
Yeah.
$500. Yeah, right there.
Yeah. 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 Sometimes you can literally see it. Sometimes it's very obvious, and other times it's not. Like, I have a colleague who also just had a mold issue, and there wasn't any glaringly obvious signs of mold, but she did notice that there was black dust sort of on everything. And she, for months, was trying to figure out what was going on with her. And she finally figured out that it was mold, and she got rid of all of her possessions because it is so difficult to remove from, you know,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. Myself, in Santa Cruz, we had moved into it was a duplex. We moved into a one bedroom, and the previous occupant took off the closet door, and I didn't know why. And she had a dehumidifier, and I didn't know why. And one morning I woke up, and 80% of my shoes were cotton puffs of mold. And yeah, I got pretty ill with that. It was also kind of a moving target, but I had been doing some other things involving chemicals. I was rebuilding a Datsun 240Z and a lot of like exhaust and like, oh man. Anyway, so I ended up getting intravenous vitamin therapy with a lot of glutathione. I did
Wow.
four of these in order to get on the other side of this mold. And yeah, it is just so challenging. But so,
Hmm.
the first step of action for somebody in this scenario is to get out of the environment. And that can be very challenging, right? If you don't have a place to go, some places, like Santa Cruz is like you're literally grandfathered into an apartment. And once you're in there, you don't want to move because there's not any better
Right.
option. So, yeah. So getting out of the environment is of utmost importance in these things. And then working with an herbalist who is going to be able to recognize that you need to think smarter, not harder, about how to reclaim the microbiome, because the mold kind of functions like candida. It's like a yeast. It's like an overgrowth. It can manifest like small intestine bacterial overgrowth. It can manifest, with some heartburn or things that would be considered stomach fire, or even like rectal pain, like hemorrhoids and things like that. Like it just screws up the entire digestive tract and gets into the spinal fluid and is in the Shao Yang. It's just an overall, I think that the metaphor for zombie apocalypse is people who have been exposed to mold for prolonged times.
Well,
I think about like Plants versus Zombies, and I'm like, oh, that's so interesting.
you're making us think, and we're not alleging anything here, but when you look at Britney Spears and some of the cray cray things that she's done, she was living in a house that had mold, and as scientifically documented that it can have an effect on your mental health. Just saying, interesting
It is
that
interesting.
we look
Yeah.
at that. And those, to your point, it's so challenging because the spores are microscopic.
Yeah.
So once pretty much you got to get rid of everything because you don't even know where they are. With the time we have left, I want to throw something out to you because I'm connected friends with an infectious disease doctor. He was big during COVID, very visible, and he recently reached out to me and he said, "Yeah, COVID, yeah, it's ticking up here and there, but the main concern is Mpox."
Mhm.
And there is I don't want to say epidemic, but the numbers are up. World Health Organization, I think, put an emergency alert out for that around the world. Just so it's on our radar.
Yep.
Mpox, what do you think?
Yeah, again, working with an herbalist, like we have the understanding to recognize what the pattern is, to recognize which herbs might be beneficial. So the most important thing with these is, and with most kind of latent and prolonged pathogens, is to release the surface, is to vent a rash or push the pathogen out and not keep it inside, not suppress it. And so, yeah, gugun or kudzu root is an interesting invasive species that I think has an intelligent design for some of these pathogens. So it is an herb that will release the muscle level. It will vent rashes and measles. And so that is an interesting herb to use in a formulation that would be for an exterior wind heat pathogen. And then also too, which is interestingly another invasive species, is honeysuckle. That has been used historically for really bad sore throats. It will help with encephalitis or meningitis. It helps with staph infection and strep throat and things like that. Yeah, so some of these things, like you can literally go out to your backyard and be like, damn this invasive species, but oh, all of these benefits for, human pathogenic intelligence, we'll say.
Wow. Well, you think about it, mold is nothing new. It's been around for since the beginning. We've been around, um, and we've continued to sustain. So if you look back, they figured out that certain things growing in our backyard can support us. Interesting, you said with Mpox that we don't want to suppress it; we want to eradicate it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it goes against our thinking. It's like, football game, pounce on the the
Yeah.
person with the ball.
What
Completely
doesn't
different.
kill you makes you stronger. There's
I
that, like,
guess.
that intelligence of the body, like, adapting to figure out, okay, I've got experience with this. Like, now I know kind of what to do, and
Hmm.
creating antibodies. Um, so
Wow.
yeah,
How do we're
mold
out
is
of
a
time?
different one though. Yeah, here we are.
I'm still dealing with what came out of you and knowing
I
that
know. I'm sorry. It is such a
knowing that
immense.
I'm hosting that. I'm hosting that and this podcast. How, can't make it up.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
how do we find you? How do we connect with you, Rebecca?
Yep, my website is rwbacupuncture.com. My handle on Instagram is TheSharpAcupuncturist. And you can throw The Sharp Acupuncturist on YouTube and find several of these interviews. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
We're not trying to scare anybody. I was transparent. I took a test just on a whim, and that's what came back. Many of us are probably dealing with that and don't even know it. And that's just one thing. But, if you're having some issues, whatever they are, herbals is the answer. I'm gravitating away from traditional medicine. I really am, as much as I can. And for that, there's you. So thank you so much for being here today. Truly appreciate it.
yeah. My pleasure, Steve. Have a great day.
You too. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.